Hello and welcome back to part 2 of the second session. In this session, we will unpack certain investment principles. We will look at some investment vehicles. We will also look at goal setting and some projections. Let's take a closer look at some of these investment concepts. First, what is an investment by definition? It is an asset that is acquired with the goal of 1. Generating an income and or appreciating in value in the future. This will sound familiar to you as we have been using the analogy of the tree being an investment since the first session. So in generating an income, we want this tree to provide us with a certain benefit in the future, whether it is fruit, shelter, shade, whatever the case might be. And of course, we also want this tree to grow. So in that way, it will, if it was an investment, appreciate in value. Secondly, and we have looked at this a couple of times, but there are certain ways in which you can contribute towards an investment. You can do it on a recurring basis, for instance, contributing your 500 Rand per month towards your retirement annuity or your discretionary investment, or ad hoc lump sum contributions. These could be windfalls of any kind. Perhaps you received an annual bonus or a refund from SARS and you decide to also contribute this towards your investment, which would be a very good idea as this will act as fertilizer, as we have spoken before. Time and patience. Remember the sun from our very first session and how we said that patience really is key when it comes to investing. We need to realize, especially if you are a young person, that it is not an instant gratification game. It takes time and it takes a lot of patience to grow these trees, to grow your investment portfolios so that you can reap the rewards one day. Just to explain this a little bit more and also in a fun way is of course the very famous marshmallow experiment from the 1970s conducted by Stanford University. This was captured beautifully in an advertisement by Absa Bank, and that is what we are going to play. Just a very short video on that.
Would you like to have a seat, Timothy? Okay, Timothy, I have one marshmallow here for you, and you can either eat it or you can save it. When I come back later, if you haven't eaten, I'll give you another marshmallow, and then you'll have two, and then you'll have two, and then you'll have two. Okay.
I'm saving.
Okay. Timothy, did you save it? You get two marshmallows.
Now looking at the principle of compound growth, or as referred to by the very famous scientist Albert Einstein, the eighth wonder of the world. Compound growth is really about making your money work for you, and that is exactly what you want from your investment portfolio. So if we had to take, for example, 1,000 Rand and you had to invest it and you receive an interest of 8% per annum, that would mean at the end of year one, the interest you would receive would be 80 Rand, and your amount or your compound amount will now of course be 1,080. It is your 1,000 that you started out with plus your 80 Rand interest that will give you this compound amount. Now for the second year, this compound amount will be invested as your principal amount, and again you will receive 8%. However, this 8% will now be calculated on the 1,080 and not only on the 1,000 Rand, giving you interest of 86 Rand and 40 cents for the second year. Again, this compound amount at the end of year 2 will be your principal amount at the start of year 3, and so it continues. And you can see, even though the rate of return remains flat, your interest will escalate over time. So what you will see happening after 10 years is your 1,000 Rand that you invested grew to over 2,100 Rand. And remember, this was at a flat rate of 8%. If we had to invest this 1,000 Rand, let's call it in the real world, your rate of return might have been, and most likely would have been, more than 8%, because it would not have been only interest. When we have a time horizon of 10 years, we would also include in your investment portfolio other growth assets like property and shares. So you won't only receive interest, there will also be dividends that will be paid out to you. So it will most likely be more than the amount that you see here up on the screen. But just for the sake of this exercise, we just used this fixed rate of 8%. Your money doubled up just by you being patient. So it's basically 1,000 Rand that you put away, you forgot about it, you didn't add anything to it, it just grew all by itself and you doubled up on it just by being patient. Of course, we did not take the effect of inflation or the time value of money into account when it comes to this example, but this is really to illustrate the powerful effect of compound growth. So this was over 10 years, but what happens if you leave this 1,000 Rand to grow for 40 years? You will see it will come close to 22,000 Rand after 40 years. And once again, because we have a time horizon of 40 years, the rate of return would absolutely be more than an average of 8%. Once again, because the investment portfolio will not only give you interest in return, as we will be including other growth assets in it as well. So this really illustrates the powerful effect of compound growth over time. Imagine if you invested 10,000 Rand and you had to leave it for 40 years, or even 100,000 Rand and you had to let it grow for 40 years, what it will become after those 40 years. The effect is actually astounding. We're now gonna try and bust a myth that is going around there in, let's call it, the public domain, and that would be the myth of I am too young to start saving to retirement now. So if you are watching this and let's say you're about 25 years old or even 30 years old and you're thinking, nah, retirement is about 40 years away, I don't need to start saving towards retirement now, I can still enjoy my life, I'll start when I'm about 50. That seems like a very good age. But let's see if we can bust this myth. We have three people here, person A, person B, and person C, and let's see how they contribute towards investment over time. Person A contributes from a very young age, the age of 21, for 9 years. So that is of course up until the age of 30. And he contributes 500 Rand per month or 6,000 Rand per year, which basically comes down to the same thing. And then after these 9 years, at the age of 30, person A stops contributing. So that's very important to note. So it was only for a term of 9 years that person A contributed this 500 Rand per month. Then we have person B, who only starts when person A stopped contributing, which will be at the age of 30. Person B also contributes 500 Rand per month, so exactly the same as person A. However, person B contributes for a term of 36 years. So that's basically up until the date of retirement. Then you have person C. This is basically a combination of person A and person B, best of both worlds, because person C started from a very young age as person A at the age of 21, also contributed 500 Rand per month and continued to contribute for 36 years like person B. Remember, this will not be up until retirement date, or let's say the age of 65 or 66. It was only a term of 36 years. So person C was actually in his mid-50s when he stopped contributing. Let's now see what their investments became after these terms. Person A, remember, starting very young at age 21 and only contributing for 9 years. After he stopped contributing at age 30, the investment just grew on its own. You will note once again that we have used this flat rate of 10% just for the sake of this example. We wanted to keep that variable component the same across all of the illustrations. Once again, as I've mentioned, when it came to compound growth, this will look radically different if we had to plan for a term of, let's say, 40 or 50 years. But person A, his investment grew to almost 2.8 million Rand, as you would see from this table. Person B, in turn, having invested the same amount for 36 years up until retirement, his investment only came close to 2 million Rand. So that's a couple of 100,000 Rand less than person A. If you had to look at the contributions, person A actually contributed 4 times less than person B, but he ended up with almost 2.8 million versus person B close to 2 million. And then last but not least is the very clever person C, who decided to start young but also contributed for 36 years. You can see here at the age of 56 or 57, he stopped contributing and the investment grew by itself at 10%. And his investment was over 4.6 million Rand at the time that he reached 65. So this is absolutely astounding. And even if we had to compare this on a graph, this black line would represent person A, starting at 21, only contributing until here, age 30, but this is what the investment became. Person B, of course, this gray line, only started contributing from the age of 30, but contributed the entire term until age 65. And there you can see just below the 2 million. And last but not least, certainly not in last place, is person C, starting early at 21, only contributing until this age of about 56 or 57. And then you can see this investment just basically shooting the lights out, almost reaching 4.7 million Rand. So yes, we absolutely did bust the myth when it comes to I am too young to start saving for retirement. So to all, let's call it the youngsters out there, or even if you are not that young anymore, remember you're not getting any younger. So the best time to start saving or investing will always be now. It's almost like that famous Chinese proverb where they say the best time to plant a tree was actually 20 years ago, but the second best time is now. Investments work exactly the same. This example was based on saving towards retirement, which of course will be only one of your financial goals. So let's take a closer look at what financial goals are and how can we assist you to reach those goals. Thank you, Kiara.
You may have a number of different savings goals, and each of these goals can fall into different time horizons. Overall, we have 3 main groups. your short, medium, and long-term types of investment goals. Your short-term goals range anywhere between 0 to 3 years. Your medium term is anything greater than 3 years up to 7 years, and your long term is generally classified as anything greater than 7 years. As you can see, we have listed some examples of the kinds of goals that will be categorized under each investment time horizon. Goals are usually connected to a specific timeline. Any goal that we wish to achieve in life will take time and consistency, but each goal is unique. Let's have a look at what we mean by time spreads out your risk. Looking at the variety of different risk profiles we've got here for different investments, we've got aggressive being the orange line, moderately aggressive, moderate, cautious, and conservative. It is imperative to connect your goal to the right kind of risk profile investment. This is directly linked to time. Let me illustrate using an example. If you were planning on disinvesting or withdrawing from your investment within the next year to 2.5 years, it is wiser for you not to go into the aggressive risk kind of assets. And the reason for that is the volatility. If you look at the market fluctuations taking place here, you are more likely to realize losses in the short term when it comes to your aggressive assets. However, given time to grow, we see that in this growth range over here, the outperformance is substantial. If you were to stay invested for the long term in a more conservative fund, yes, there may not be as much volatility taking place throughout the years, but you really do have this trade-off of losing out on substantial outperformance in the market. If you are planning on investing in something and letting it grow for 5 to 7 or more years, rather have a look at diversifying your portfolio, but exposing it to your higher risk assets so that you can get the most out of your investment growth. When it comes to needing capital in the short term, looking at your more cautious or conservative investment types would be the best options for you. There are less market fluctuations in your cautious or conservative portfolios than there are with a moderately aggressive, and aggressive portfolio. The reason for that is it is connected to different asset classes. Different asset classes like property, equity, bonds, they all have varying levels of risk. And that's what causes all of this volatility that we see displayed on this graph. So the big question is, what is risk? Risk means different things to different people. To some, it might be opportunity. To others, it might mean uncertainty. And so when we look at risk, there are two main categories of risk where it can be defined. There is risk that an investor would need to establish for himself or herself, and there is risk that everybody will be exposed to within the investments environment. So when looking at what risk means to an investor, we see risk tolerance, and that's what I mentioned about how does a person feel about taking risk. What does it mean to a specific person? Does it mean opportunity? Does it mean uncertainty? Does it mean danger? When you look at risk capacity, that is the client's actual financial capacity to withstand market losses. In other words, is there other savings or investments which the client can rely on if they need money in case of emergencies? What is risk required? We have heard the term higher risk is higher return, or lower risk is lower return. Each of your investment goals is assigned to a specific risk category. In order for you to achieve a specific investment goal, it is required that you would take on a certain amount of risk. The rule of thumb is that the longer the investment horizon, the more the portfolio can actually handle risk. The lower the investment horizon, the less a portfolio can handle risk. When we have a look at the investment environment, there are various different types of risk as we've listed here. We've got market risk, inflation risk, currency risk, political risk. Although certain things may take place in other countries, the market is more interlinked than we might realize. We've got concentration risk, we've got liquidity risk, and we've got investment management risk. This is more of the constant risk. This is what all people will be exposed to throughout all of their investments. Navigating what kind of risk profile suits you best as an investor can be quite a large task. And so we've put together this short video that hopefully helps explain things to you and helps you find which kind of investor do you best relate to.
have a lot of dreams, and rightly so, we should dream. But at the end of the day, a dream will only remain a dream unless it is written down. Once it is written down, it becomes a goal. So we would have a lot of people which approach us in the industry say, I wish I had a new car, or I would love to have a new home, and oh, I'm so looking forward to retire comfortably one day. But then we ask them, what are you actively doing about that in the meantime? Then they don't have a plan of action. And that is exactly our objective when it comes to the next part of the session, creating your financial goal grid. These would really be your financial dreams on paper so that we can turn this into achievable financial goals over time. So you will see up on the screen, we are just going to pretend that this is my financial goal grid. We have also provided you with a PDF document of this goal grid under the course material, and it has 10 very easy to follow steps on the document, but you can also just listen as I go through it, and you will be able to seamlessly put together your financial goal grid. So you would see here an entire table or grid with a couple of columns and also some rows. We will be adding a column or two as we go along, but the most important thing, and of course the starting point or the departure point, would be identifying my goals by when I would like to achieve them. As we have seen, time horizon is very important in the world of investment. Then why would I like to achieve this goal? And don't underestimate this column. This is very powerful stuff, because this is actually where the psychological aspect of a goal planning kicks in. Unless we know why we want to achieve something, it's sometimes very difficult to keep going at it in difficult times. Notes would just be some practical things that you need to remember or that you need to work on in the meantime. And then last but not least, what amount would I need to achieve this goal? So let's start with my financial goals. You will see here, I would love to have an emergency fund, and I want to provide myself with about 24 months in order to build this fund up. Of course, I need this for any unforeseen circumstances, and there might be a possible job change coming up. Notes, separate investment account, very important, but we'll get into this when we look in closer detail at an emergency fund later in the session. And for me, I think about 60,000 would be enough. Once again, we will look at the size of an emergency fund as we dig into emergency savings later on. Secondly, I'd like to buy an apartment in about 5 years from now, because I want my own place to live in. I don't want to rent forever. For now, however, I would just like to save about 200,000 Rand for a deposit and some of the transfer costs, even though this would be the purchase amount. Then my third goal would be start saving for retirement. We have looked at this somewhat in this session, but let's say retirement for me would be 40 years from now. Why? Because I would like to spend some time with my grandchildren, which hopefully I will have one day. And I will also like to pursue some of my hobbies that I don't necessarily have time for at this point in time. Very important for me to note, I don't have a pension or provident fund at work, so I need to look at other options. How much do I think I need when it comes to retirement? Let's say you have no idea, because it is quite complicated to calculate something like this. Let's just say for now I put in 5 million there just as a placeholder. My fourth goal would be buying a new car in about 48 months from now, just because I would like a new car. I've been driving my car for a long time, and I would need to start looking at possible financing options in the meantime. I'm not sure what I would like to get in about 4 years from now, but I'm thinking at this point in time, perhaps something about 300,000 Rand. And for now, I'm just set on saving a deposit of about 250,000 Rand. Last but not least, I have my eye on an MBA degree in about 6 years from now for career advancement and also learning and growth. And in the meantime, I'm going to research the different programs at universities, and it's going to chase about 250,000 Rand out of my pocket. So in a nutshell, on one page, these would be my financial goals. We have been asking this question quite a lot, but this is what the sessions are all about. Where do I start? So there's 3 very easy questions you can ask yourself, and we're going to look at each one of these in detail. The first one would be, how much would you need to invest per month to achieve each goal? The second one, how much can you realistically afford to invest per month? And then thirdly, which goals are vital to start saving for now or at an early age? So let's look at the very first question in detail. How much would you need to invest per month to achieve each goal? And you will notice that we have added another column to the grid, as I've mentioned previously in the session, with the heading amount needed per month. So how did we get to these amounts? Please note, it is not 100% correct. It's not accurate in the sense that we have taken the time value of money into account. I mean, basically saving for retirement 40 years from now, or even doing an MBA degree 6 years from now, inflation will absolutely have an effect on this. And of course, we have also omitted the investment growth that you will receive on whatever you invest. But this is just a good place to start, just to get a basic idea of how much per month we are talking about. For instance, if we had to look at my very first goal, saving for an emergency or putting up an emergency fund, of course I need 60,000 Rand, and that divided by my time horizon of 24 months would come down to about 2,500 Rand per month. Then you'll see I have done the same for buying an apartment. Saving for retirement I just left out because that would have been a very complicated calculation. And then also buying a car, you will see here the monthly amount just over 1,000 Rand to save for my deposit, and the same goes for my MBA degree, almost 3,500 Rand to get 250,000 Rand together for my MBA degree. Like I've mentioned, this column doesn't have to be perfect, as long as it gives you a basic idea of what your point of departure would be when it comes to saving or investing towards reaching your goals. The second question, how much can you realistically afford to save or invest per month? If I had to add all of those amounts up in my very last column, it would be over 10,500 Rand. So if I had to look at my monthly financial blueprint, I don't have over 10,500 Rand for all of these financial goals. But don't get discouraged. You would see up here on the screen, we have put this one-liner, it is better to start small than not at all. And hopefully, through the examples we've shown you when it comes to the Mythbuster, also compound growth, it's really about contributing on a recurring basis, and over a long period of time, your money will work for you. In this step, you then have to look at your monthly financial blueprint to determine what can you realistically afford to allocate towards these financial goals. So let's say, for instance, I can afford about 1,500 Rand per month, then this is what we have to work with. Let's go to the third question. Which goals are vital to start saving for now or at an early age? So for me, being very young, but in general, these two would come up as being vital goals actually for all people in phases in life, would firstly be start an emergency fund, and secondly, a saving for retirement. So remember, I had 1,500 Rand that I can allocate to these two vital goals of mine. So now we just need to determine how much for each of these goals. There's not really a right and a wrong, but seeing that retirement is still 40 years away from now, and I want to get my emergency fund up and running as soon as possible, I've decided to allocate R1,000 per month for this first goal of mine, to start an emergency fund, and my R500 I will contribute to my retirement annuity. So this would then be your very last column of your financial goal grid, and this column together with your notes will be your plan of action. Remember, it's no good in only having this on paper. We need to take action. You'll also see step 10 on the PDF will say take action. You will actually have to go and open up a separate account that can serve as an emergency fund. In the same way, you will have to go and open, let's say, a retirement annuity, because that will be your best option when it comes to saving for retirement. Remember, if there's no action, it's only a goal on a piece of paper, and you won't reach it at the end of the day. And in that way, I guess it will only remain a dream. Before we move on to look in much more detail at an emergency fund and also at saving for retirement, I just quickly want to distinguish between savings and investing. The terms are used interchangeably, but yes, there is really a big difference. This slide will show the basic differences when it comes to saving versus investing. Saving will be over the very short term, for instance, a couple of months, and it will be for future purchases and emergencies. Future purchases, for instance, if I would like to buy myself a new leather handbag and it's going to cost me R3,000, I would need to save, let's say, 2 months, and then I will be able to buy that handbag. Or I would like to go on vacation in 6 months from now, and I would need to save, let's say, R20,000. That will also fall under this saving for the very short term. When it comes to emergencies, we also look at savings, because we need to have savings sort of stashed away if emergencies arise in our life. In that way, it will protect you and your investments. But we will look at this in detail when we discuss an emergency fund just after this slide. Investing, on the other hand, we divide into short, medium, and long-term investment goals. Remember, earlier on in the session, Kihara spoke about these short, medium, and long-term goals, and we have also looked at some of these investment goals when we discussed your financial goal grid. In that way, investments will really help to grow you and to achieve your goals in the long run. Now let's proceed to look at that very first financial goal that we have identified in depth, and that will of course be the emergency fund. When it comes to planning for emergencies, it's really not a question of if, but rather of when. An emergency is something that can be defined as a serious, unexpected, and often dangerous situation requiring immediate attention. Whatever your emergency would be, if it has an impact on your finances, it could have a devastating effect. When we say unexpected, it really needs to be unexpected. An unexpected job loss, or perhaps paying for major health expenses that your medical aid doesn't cater for. You might need to move house and you didn't plan on moving house, or there could be other financial emergencies that you didn't see coming. You need to be very clear on what you view as an emergency. Let's say, for instance, the travel agent phoned you and says there's this amazing deal at a very good price, of course, of a trip to Bali, and it's going to expire in the next 2 weeks. So you need to book ASAP if you want to be on that plane. That is not a financial emergency. If you would like to go on a holiday or you would like to travel, you need to plan for this and you need to have reserves for that. An emergency really should be something that's unexpected, serious, and that will have a devastating impact on your finances. So what you can actually do, you can go and write down some rules of what an emergency will look like to you. It would be different for all of us. And if you would like to access that emergency fund, you need to go through that list of rules and first see if it qualifies. Otherwise, it is best not to access your emergency savings because it is not what it was intended for in the very first place. Because if we had to put this in a picture, this is really what emergency savings should be for. It should protect you and your investments. When we say your emergency savings should protect you, we really mean it should keep you from falling into bad debt. Remember those weeds we spoke about when we discussed the financial forests and also your monthly financial blueprint? Because if there's an emergency, the first place people run to would be a credit card or a personal loan. If you had that emergency savings, you can access those funds to cater for your emergencies expenses, and it won't be necessary to fall into the trap of bad debt. Secondly, it also protects your investments in the sense that you don't prematurely have to withdraw from your investments. Remember when we looked at your tree in the very first session, we said that if we want to withdraw from your tree, we will have to cut off some of the branches or actually cut off the entire tree if we withdraw from this investment. Ideally, we only want the fruit or the shelter or the shade at this point in time, unless of course this tree was meant to be cut down at a later stage because we need those funds to reach a specific financial goal. But then we would plan for that. It won't arise out of an emergency. So that is how important an emergency fund is. We don't want to destroy your financial forest at the end of the day. If we had to look at this effect of a premature withdrawal on your investments on this graph, this will look familiar. Kihara shared this earlier in the session, but once again, just touching on this. Let's say, for instance, we invested for the long term, let's say 10 years or 20 years from now, and we were in the aggressive portfolio. That will be the orange line. But now suddenly an emergency arises. Let's say here, right here where the market dipped. Now, unfortunately, you have no other option but to withdraw from this investment of yours. In this way, you will actually realize a loss as an investor because you will withdraw at a time from your investment where it is absolutely not the best time to do so. That is why when we look at emergency funds, we would rather invest in something more conservative, as you would see this light gray line at the bottom. So how does this fund then look like? When we had to look at choosing this vehicle, ideally you want this to be in a separate fund. You don't want the emergency fund money being part of whatever is in your check account, because the temptation is always there then when you go to the mall or you go grocery shopping to actually spend the emergency money as well. Secondly, it needs to be easy to access. In this way, you can't keep emergency fund money in a 32 days notice account, for instance, because 32 days down the line, the emergency would be long over. In the third place, there needs to be low market risk. Once again, referring back to the graph we just looked at, it can't be in an aggressive portfolio or even in a moderate portfolio. It needs to be in something more conservative, because by the time we need the money or you need the money, you need to be able to withdraw from that emergency without huge consequences when it comes to your investment. And in the last place, it at least needs to provide a reasonable return. In other words, don't keep your emergency fund money under your mattress. At least keep it in an account that will provide you with a reasonable return, even if it is a low interest rate per annum. We at Fairstream have an excellent option for an emergency fund, but we'll speak on that in the third session. Then if we had to look at the target amount of an emergency fund, remember when we looked at the financial goals, my target amount for my emergency fund was 60,000. How did I get to that amount? Well, we can look at what your monthly living expenses would be. And the best place, of course, to get this is from your monthly financial blueprint. So let's say, for instance, my living expenses per month is 20,000 Rand. I receive a salary each and every month. So that times 3 gives me the 60,000 Rand. If you are doing freelancing work, or you're perhaps an independent contractor, so your income might not be that stable on a monthly basis, then we advise that you have at least 6 months worth of living expenses in your emergency fund. Even if you only receive a salary and you want your emergency fund to be bigger than only the 3 months worth of living expenses, that is also a good idea. At least you will be able to sustain yourself then for a couple of months until you are in desperate need of money. And then last but not least, how do we actually get this money together to start this emergency fund? Firstly, as we have seen, as we looked at the examples, it is possible to save every month. So you can allocate a certain amount in your financial blueprint for your emergency fund. Secondly, you could consider cutting down on some luxuries for a season. Remember, it's only going to be a season until you have reached that target amount or that goal amount of your emergency fund, and then you can go back to living the luxurious life. Thirdly, deposit any windfalls. If any money comes your way and you don't need it for something, put it in your emergency fund. It will help build it faster. And last but not least, you can consider a temporary side hustle for a while. Do something over weekends, or perhaps you enjoy baking. You can sell some of your cupcakes to friends and families and to your community, and in that way build your emergency fund faster. This then concludes the emergency fund, how it should look like, why it is important, and how do you actually get this fund up and running. Kihara will now take over on the last topic for the session, planning for retirement. Over to you.
The way that we handled or looked at retirement planning traditionally, maybe for our parents or grandparents, aunties and uncles, is very different to the way that we need to consider it today. And the reason for that is traditional retirement planning is fast changing. There are a number of reasons attributing to this. One is longevity, or human life expectancy has increased. Technology has also been rapidly increasing, and this has played a massive role on the employment sector. All of these factors have also changed the way we are engaging with learning and development, which we'll get into in a moment. A very important point to consider here is something that us South Africans are rather exposed to, and that is what we call the sandwich generation. Now, what does that mean? When we are planning for our personal retirement, we not only need to consider how much monies we will need to provide for ourselves throughout the duration of our personal retirement, but we find ourselves sandwiched between two generations, our children and our parents. So when we plan for retirement, we not only need to consider ourselves, but also consider the provision that our children are going to need, as well as the provision that our parents are going to need. Let's have a look at this graph. So we'll see on this graph, we've got the ages spanned across the top over here, and we've got the old paradigm as well as an emerging reality taking place. So let's examine the old paradigm first. One of the things that stands out for us here is this rate of change. Although it has been increasing and taking place over the years, it has been relatively consistent. This has impacted 3 key areas towards the steps of retiring. The first would be education. Looking at education in the old paradigm, this was something that usually took place in the beginning phases of a person's life. Maybe there was an overlap with tertiary education and work at their mid to late 20s, but for the most people, they would finish up their education and jump into work. Now we see that work also took place but early to mid 20s and spanned up until the age of around 65, which was traditionally the retirement age. Some of us were able to retire a little bit earlier. If you have a lower life expectancy, the number of years which you need to provide for yourself for after work is less. When moving down to this graph below, we see a standout difference with this rate of change. It is very rapid, it's sporadic, and it has definitely impacted what seems to be taking place beneath it. One being human life expectancy. There is an increase on the number of years that people are living. Another area where it's influenced is learning. In order to keep up with this constant rate of change, people are needing to learn more. It's no longer something that is taking place at the beginning of a lifetime, but rather something that continues throughout a lifetime. We've seen the adaptability of this in the internet. E-learning, short courses, more online universities have started emerging to facilitate this increasing need to keep up with the fast rate of change. A lot of these materials are also available at a lower cost, meaning that more people have access to them. Another area that has been impacted is because of the longer life expectancy, people are tending to work for longer periods in order to be able to support themselves, their families, their children, maybe even their parents after they retire. This is most probably the biggest difference taking place here. Traditionally, what we would call retirement is starting to become remaining engaged, or something that the industry calls refiring. Now, what does that mean? Because of the increase of the availability of learning material, people are able to very quickly and easily change careers. This is really good for the older generations. Perhaps their work in the earlier stages of their life was very intensive physically, construction work, maintenance work, doing heavy lifting. Towards the end periods of their lives, perhaps they can no longer engage in that kind of work. And so they start to upskill themselves in other areas, which is more conducive for their age. And so they no longer have this need to retire, or maybe even desire to retire, because they're starting to engage in a new field and build up their careers in that field, generating an income and remaining engaged. Now the question is, how do we plan for an unknown, nearly 100-year life when tomorrow is really promised to no one? There is this graph over here by Linda Smith, the founder of 50 Plus Skills, and this illustrates really nicely of what's taking place in this new reality, or this emerging reality for retirement planning. So in this first quadrant, we have 0 to 25 years old. This is considered your developmental age. This is where you are discovering your passions, what you are interested in life, what career you would like to perhaps engage in, and maybe you start to move out. So you need to be able to just provide for yourself, or maybe your brother or sister. Moving into your first life, what is that? That is looking at your 25 to 50 year range. Over here, your provision scale would increase and you would start to expand who you are providing for. You maybe get married, get children, and your career starts to really take root, accelerate, and you start to establish yourself in your first life. From years 50 to 75, which in the old paradigm would be where our parents, grandparents, and aunties and uncles start to retire or relax, we actually see this second life taking place over here. This refiring, a rechanneling taking place. And people in this phase tend to want to build a legacy, imparting their wisdom and so much experience which they gained over this phase of their lives. And although perhaps they're not earning as much as what they were earning in these years of their lives, they are still enjoying life and getting an income. In this third phase, we see 75 plus. This is what's considered to be the new retirement age, where people can really start to relax and accept their lives, live off their hard earnings and the legacy which they have left behind them. I think it's important to note that Fairtree does view retirement a little bit differently. When we talk about this topic of planning for retirement, I think it's good to challenge what we view retirement as. When we plan to retire, we are not only walking away from a monthly financial provision. We are also walking away from a number of these elements over here. For example, the office environment offers relationships, social connection, and teamwork that if we retire, we are no longer exposed to or engaging in. The workplace also gives us a sense of achievement and growth, like we are part of something that is greater than ourselves, that we are contributing to society and building something of purpose. The biggest thing that retirees struggle from post-retirement is boredom, which has a severe impact on their medical health and has increased the rate of depression substantially. And so when we start to consider what age we would like to retire, we need to not only consider the financial implication of retirement, but all these other softer implications that it may have on us as an individual. We've put together a retirement lifestyle forecaster for you to have a look at. This aims to actually see what lifestyle could we expect to have in retirement on our existing savings plan. And we'll be looking at 3 individuals, a little case study to see how this actually is calculated. So looking at Andrea, she started working at 21, but decided she was a little bit too young to start contributing towards retirement. So at 24, she decided to start contributing 1,500 Rand towards her retirement. Looking at this existing lifestyle calculator, we see that on her current savings plan, given the amount of years, 24 to 65, that she's going to be saving this monthly, her current savings plan is going to leave her at around about 7,700 Rand a month in retirement, which is equivalent to really a caravan type lifestyle. So if we want to assess or take a look at what does she actually require, so her current salary or current lifestyle is comfortable on about 20,000 Rand. If she wanted to stay at that existing lifestyle, she would need to start contributing about 4,000 Rand monthly, or alternatively about 50,000 Rand per year up until 65 if she were to secure her existing lifestyle. Then you have Andile. He started working at 21 and started contributing immediately. He also increased his contribution to Andrea's 1,500 to a 1,700 Rand a month, and now he is 24 years old, so he's the same age as Andrea. So what kind of standard of living can he expect to receive? We see that by just increasing it by 200 Rand and starting 3 years earlier, this has a significant upgrade in the kind of lifestyle that he will be living. However, looking at how much in Rand terms his income could expect to be in retirement, it is still quite small. So if he was to actually try and sustain his 20,000 Rand living lifestyle, he would need to start contributing 3,000 Rand per month, or a 36,000 Rand per year. Taking a look at Andy. So Andy, just like Andile, started working at 21, he's 24 years old, also started contributing immediately at 21 of the 1,700 Rand. So here, following exactly the same as Andile, however, he also decided to give additional contributions here and there, with bonuses that he got, any side hustles, payouts from SARS, and over the 3 years he was able to give an additional 80,000 Rand. So let's have a look at what that looks like. We can see here substantial difference in lifestyle, but again, not quite making the full 100% of his salary that he wanted. If he would like to get this salary, he would need to start contributing 2,300 Rand instead of 1,700 Rand, or alternatively, about 30,000 additional each year. And so from this, we can really see a great illustration of the time value of money and how all of those little additional amounts do actually really pay off in the long run. Thank you for joining us. We trust that session 2 was extremely valuable. We look forward to meeting again for session 3, where we will see all of these principles applied in session 1 and 2 come together in the way that we apply it in a Fairtree context.